corner.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. Sorry for the delay, guys. Tim is having some technical difficulties. Long story short, he got a new computer. He's having an issue getting his mic hooked up, so he's going to go back to his old one for now. And when he gets back on, we'll get him here on the show with us as well. But we got a big show tonight. Obviously, guys, the first wave of free agency is done now. A lot of stuff a lot of new faces to bring in the team here to talk about. I see a lot of you guys in the chat already here, so we appreciate you being here. And before we get started, just a quick reminder, as always, guys, to please like the video, subscribe to the channel, give us all a follow. You can follow me at _Jeff Willis. You can follow Tim when he gets here at Tim Willis 24, and you can follow our executive producer, Aldo, at Barroom Network, and those are all on X, formerly known as Twitter. So, like I said, guys, a lot of new stuff here, a lot of new faces, a lot of big impact, what should be impactful players, I should say, that have been brought onto this team. The trades went down before last week's show with Joe Tooney and Jonah Jackson. We kind of talked about them a little bit, but there was some speculation about what Jonah Jackson, where he might play. Tim had speculated multiple occasions he thought he might be playing center. That has obviously been squashed. I was also wrong, though, as I thought that it would be more like a stopgap option they would bring in at center for the time being. But it's Drew Dahlman, who did get a 3-year deal. Now, all these deals that were signed, these big-time guys were all 3-year deals, but they really have outs after 2 years. So, in essence, they're 2-year deals with a third year where the team can get out without a significant impact to the salary cap. So, that's a big deal. I think that's something we got to consider here as well. And there's also something that happened with Grady Jarrett's contract that I want to get into a little bit later that's been different than what this regime has done in its past, because it is a pretty significant thing. Again, it's away from what they have done historically under Ryan Poles and his regime. So I am interested to go into this and talk about these guys a little bit. Again, some of these guys are older veterans, which is not something that the Bears have typically gone after. There are some young guys because they do typically go after youth, and that hasn't been different in this scenario as well either. And I see Brian and Tooch, you guys are talking about my Def Leppard shirt, talking about the Hysteria Tooch, but I got the Pyromania shirt on right now, so I don't have that one. I don't have Hysteria, but the Pyromania is probably my favorite. It's definitely my favorite Def Leppard album. Honestly, it's probably one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. I mean, I just love Def Leppard. So it's a great album. And obviously you guys are some fans. So I do feel a Hysteria Tooch. I do. But it's just, I've got the Pyromania shirt on right now. So, it is what it is. So, Tim, how are you doing right now? I see you finally got your computer on there. I cannot tell what your shirt says, though. You big something.
It's Fred Sanford, you big dummy.
Fred Sanford guy. I don't watch that show. Tim knows about it more
Loser.
than I do. He's trying to get me to watch it.
You're a loser. It's a great show. It's probably my all-time favorite show. Of course, they couldn't air that show now. Not today. They can't. It's way too politically incorrect. So
there's a lot of shows from when we were either little or before that they definitely could not show now. So that's just how it is. But in any case, there's a lot of stuff. And you're right, Brian. It's an awesome band gone too quick. They had some unfortunate travesties with the band, between the accidents and, the drummer who lost his arm.
He can still play, though. He still play.
He definitely still can play for sure. But yeah, great band, guys. I totally agree. And I love that you guys are supporters of Def Leppard as well, because I remember when I was a little kid, Tim and I riding around. I think Dad had that Cadillac at the time, didn't he?
The blue one, yep.
He had the Pyromania on cassette tape, and he would play it all the time. He'd be driving around. He had this old Cadillac. I don't know why he had that thing, but
I don't pay a lot into that though, because he also used to listen to ABC. Not another bad creation. The ABC Martin Fry, How to Be a Zillionaire. So
he did have that tape. I forgot about that. Yeah. But in any case, as Aldo's got on the screen here, thank you for this, Aldo. It's a cool little neat little trinket or not trinket. What's the word I'm looking for, guys? Tidbit. Def Leppard was formed in Sheffield, England in 1977. Pyromania and Hysteria are two of only 5 rock bands with 2 original studio albums selling over 10 million copies in the U.S. I think he's saying that those 2 albums are 2 of the only original studio albums of – oh, I see what you're saying.
There's only 2 rock bands who have done that. Def Leppard's one of them.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to get at, but I couldn't get the words out correctly. So
I'm gonna guess the other one. This is a guess. Is probably Rolling Stones. If I had to guess,
2 of only 5 rock bands, 2 original studio albums sell. It's probably the Rolling Stones. It could be Zeppelin though.
I doubt it. Zeppelin's music was never like top 10, but they're super popular.
I don't know about that. They had some pretty big studio albums, but
they only had a couple albums because the
Beatles.
When what's his name? Yeah, the Beatles. But Bonham dying in 1980 kind of made it difficult for them. So
I'd like to see if we could find that out. Who do you guys think in the chat was that other band? By the way, that was one of the other 2 bands with 2 original studio albums selling over 10 million copies in the U.S. He's probably talking about British bands, 2 of 5 British rock bands, because I would think that, I mean, I could be wrong.
I see 3 bands that this could be one of 3. It's either Stones, Zeppelin, or maybe Rush. Rush would be the other.
It's not Rush. Absolutely not Rush. There's no.
I don't know. They sold a lot.
They were not big like that.
Yes, they were.
They were, but not like commercially big. I don't think it would be Rush. It'd be like we were talking about earlier. Stones, I could see for sure. Beatles, I could see for sure.
Yeah, I could see the Beatles.
And I'm thinking it's one of those 2 most likely, but it could be Zeppelin also. What do you guys think in the chat? We'll try to find that out. We'll try to do some research on that and see what we can find out for you. But in any case, let's dig into this. Let's dig into this first wave of free agency here, guys. Obviously, like I said last week, we kind of talked a little bit about Joe Thuney being traded for and Jonah Jackson being traded for. Tim, I talked about before you came on how you had mentioned a couple of times you speculated that Jackson might be the center and how I didn't think that would be the case. And obviously we've seen now that they brought in Drew Dahlman from the Falcons, and they gave him a 3-year deal, which is really more like a 2-year deal with that out after the second year. But in essence, he's more than a stopgap. Like I thought they'd bring in too. He's a guy who they're committed to for 2 years now. So I don't think that means they can't still draft a center though. I think they still could draft a center as early as the second round. If they see a guy that they like enough, I would not be surprised if they drafted their center of the future, especially if it's a guy who they think can play some guard, who has that versatility, because who knows? I mean, Tooney's getting old. Jackson's not that young. I mean, he may not be as good as you wanted him to be. And by the way, something I wanted to mention real quick, Tim, because I know you have a thought here before I give you a mic here, but Jonah Jackson, a little tidbit came out last night. I was watching Hogan Johns earlier, and this is how I found this out. Mike Garafolo apparently mentioned last night that when the Bears traded for Jonah Jackson, part of the trade package, part of the details was they tacked on an extra year to his deal with guarantees in 2026. So he's probably here for the next 2 years. And that tells me a lot about Ben Johnson's conviction in the guy and thinking, I'm not worried about him. I know he can do what I need him to do. And by the way, thank you, Mr. Shorty, for your $10 super chat. I really appreciate that. We really appreciate that. And it says good stuff, bear down, boys. And we appreciate your support. We appreciate that you feel that way, Mr. Shorty. And if you guys are unfamiliar, Mr. Shorty is with Bears Country Productions. They have an awesome podcast as well. You guys should check them out. Go subscribe to their YouTube channel. So before I continue with my spiel that I was getting into there, Tim, give us your thoughts on what you were going to say.
Well, I got a little monologue here, a little short one. So there's a few different things. Okay, so if you guys remember last week, I made the comment that I did not think that Dahlman was on the table for the Bears. And my reasoning for that was I wasn't sure how they were going to allocate that much money into all of these different positions, because I truly felt like and believed, and I was right at the end of the day, that they needed to bring in some defensive line help as well. And I did not see them having enough money to do that with these 2 new offensive line contracts. I know we were high in salary cap space, but at the end of the day, which we all know that's a fake number because you can do so many different things, but I didn't think they would be able to do this much. They only had about $60 million available in cap space after Tooney, and then after Jackson, it was down to like $45 million. So there wasn't a lot of room to make a whole lot of big signings. Plus, you need to have enough money for your draft picks, any one-year deals, and you got to fill out your roster, right? So I kind of felt like Dahlman was just kind of something the Bears may have driven up and made noise about to try to drive up the price or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's the direction they went with. They wanted to make sure they solidified that center position, which I totally understand, and I'm very happy about. What I didn't expect was for them to go all in like they have. I saw that they signed Dio Odangbo. Tell me if I'm saying that right. I think it's Odangbo.
Yeah, Dio Odangbo. As far as I know, yes. And by the way, thank you, Mr. Sporty, for your another donation you made to us for pronouncing your name correctly. So you're welcome. That's why we try our best to pay attention. We give due or credit where it's due. So we appreciate you, Mr. Shorty. Thank you.
Jeff only knows that because I was able to join Mr. Shorty on all those podcasts a few weeks back. Of course, Jeff would know that if he was there, but he wasn't. So
real recognize real, Tim. That's what it is.
In any case, I do want to say after the Dio Odangbo signing, I thought, okay, they're done. Now they've spent. Now they're going to have enough money to do their draft picks and so on and so forth. And then, like within an hour, they signed Grady Jarrett, and I was like, that's when, as soon as that move happened, my first thought and reaction was, they're all in. They're all in for this year. It's play. And a matter of fact, Jeff, I can't remember if it was you that I text or if I messaged this group chat we're in, but my first words were, it's playoffs or bust. Because now I truly feel like they are sold and bought in. Now is the time. Because you don't. Go ahead.
I just real quick, I got to cut you off because I don't want to lose this thought I've got in my head. There's 2 things that went to my mind immediately after the Grady Jarrett deal. Number one, I do agree with you. We're obviously all in, but that wasn't necessarily in the back because I kind of already had that thought going on in the first place. We better be all in right now because we only have our quarterback for so long in this rookie deal. We gotta be all in right now. So I feel like there was a couple things that were going through my mind. Number one, they know they need a depth on the defensive line, and this is going to give them a lot more than just depth, bringing in Grady Jarrett. They needed leadership on their defensive line. They're going to get leadership from Grady Jarrett. The individual that he is, everybody keeps talking about the individual that Grady Jarrett is and the culture he's going to bring to the defensive line and to the defensive meeting rooms is a big deal, to the locker room. This is a big deal. And again, we've talked about this so many times in the past. What Poles has done in his 3 years with this regime, in his 3 years with this team, the way he's structured both free agent contracts, his own pending free agents, or his own guys that he's given extensions to, draft picks, things of that nature, the way he has manipulated the salary cap in his time here and the way he has made it to where it's not backbreaking down the line in the future where he's backloading a bunch of contracts. And again, we'll talk about in a second here. Something that Ryan Pace did a lot in his Bears tenure, backloading a lot of contracts, and it made it very difficult to get out from underneath those. And then you have big cap hits for guys that aren't even on the roster because you really just need to move on at that point. Poles has done a really good job avoiding that, which opened up this opportunity here with Grady Jarrett because I don't think everybody was expecting Grady Jarrett to get cut. And when he did get cut, Poles said, look, this is a guy, he probably had his eyes on him for a long time. This is a guy that everybody has known about for a long time. Grady Jarrett's a great player. He's an all pro player in Atlanta. You know, he's been a longtime veteran now, but he's had his best years in Atlanta as an all pro player. Go ahead, Tim.
If it weren't for a man named Aaron Donald, we're probably talking about him being the best 3 technique in all of football.
Probably. He might not have been all pro, but he was certainly a Pro Bowler multiple time Pro Bowler.
Yes.
So in any case, this is a guy who's going to, even at his age, he's still got juice, and he's going to immediately come in and make your team better. He's going to be help with another thing I was thinking about when they made this deal. Can you imagine having him in the middle of Gervon Dexter and then having two guys on the edge wreaking havoc outside of that? You got Sweat there, probably Dio, as you were talking about before, Odangbo, the free agent signing. You could also potentially have Austin Booker out there. A draft pick that they bring in could potentially be out there. I want to get to that a little bit later too. But again, it's like you're looking at this like now you have a defensive line with serious depth. And you are able to do this because of the way that you manage your salary cap. Now, that brings me to Grady Jarrett's deal. And I know you want to talk about this a little bit too, Tim. So Grady Jarrett's contract, this is the first deal under Ryan Poles' regime here that they have given a player a backloaded deal. And what that means is the first year of his contract is not the one that has the big cap hit. It's the later years of his deal. Now, that being said, this deal is still constructed in a way that there is an out after year two. I think it's like $11.75 million is his salary for year 3, but they have an out before that. I don't know if they have to pay a portion of that at all. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they can get out from under the deal after year 2. Now there is a big guarantee in year 2. So this is a deal that they're tied to here next year. So they really need him to pan out these next couple years for this to not be a bad signing, really. But I don't think it will be. I think he's going to be just fine. This guy's played a lot of football. This is a guy who has not missed a lot of time. And again, he's been very productive. So he's going to be a leader. He's going to be a guy who comes in and gives you production. He doesn't have to play the amount of snaps that he's played in his past in Atlanta. This guy played a shitload of snaps last year in Atlanta. He's not going to have to play snaps like that here in Chicago. They've got a little bit more depth than that. So especially when you consider the fact Gervon Dexter he's been a pretty good player for his first couple years in a role he's totally new to, and he's only ascending. So I think that I really like the move. I think it's helpful for the entire defensive line. I think it's helpful for Gervon Dexter. It's a guy he can learn from. And I just think that this is something it's really going to help the defense go. It's really going to help them get that pass rush that they need, especially on third down, second and long situations, obvious pass rush downs, so I love that move. I love the move for him. Even if it is backloaded, it's not something that's going to kill them. Even if it doesn't work out the first couple years, I would like it to. I think it's important. And like I said, I think they really need it to work the first couple years for it to be not a bad contract. But at the end of the day, though, it won't kill them if it doesn't, because again, they can get out after 2 years. So I feel like with all these moves, and again, we already talked about earlier about Tooney being traded for. He's still a great player. Jonah Jackson, they obviously feel very confident with his ability to play right tackle. Right guard. They brought in Odangbo from Indianapolis this season. Ascending player is a big guy, real big guy. And a lot of people, if you've been paying attention around both to local Chicago people with podcasts and whatnot, and even people in Indianapolis, a lot of people talked about how the situation in Indy was just not very good for anybody defensively. That the secondary was so bad that really it was not conducive to any pass rushers. So to not necessarily hold it against Odangbo. So I think he's an ascending player. I feel like it's not a backbreaking contract. $16 million is a lot of money, but in 2 years that could look like a bargain. So it just all depends on how he plays and how the salary cap rises and all those things. So I think it's a good move. It's not a backbreaking move. You want it to work out. And I think it's a guy that fits the Dennis Allen mold. But again, in my opinion, I don't think they're done with the defensive line. And I still want to get into that. And that's why I want to talk about it a little bit when we get into this draft talk, because I really think that there's a chance that they could go defensive line early in the draft. Edge rusher possibly even. So I'll talk about that a little bit. But Tim, do you have any last minute thoughts on either Grady Jarrett or these contracts or the free agents that they've brought in to this point so far through the first wave?
I got a lot of thoughts, and I'll finish my point earlier. So
sorry about that.
Like I said, my first thought was they're all in. They're doing everything that they can to win right now. It's playoffs or bust. And then, like you mentioned, and I was talking to you about this earlier, with that backloaded deal being the first time Poles has done that, it shows me that we are willing to go outside of our comfort zone, do things differently than when we've done them before. We will leave no stone unturned to try to turn this thing around and get to winning football. They'll do anything they have to do. And they've been very frugal and not willing to backload those deals because they don't want to, number one, like you were just talking about, feel like they're stuck in a contract where they can't get out of it. And backloading that deal shows that we're ready to win now. We have this small window where we don't have to pay Caleb the big money yet. We need to win this thing in the next 2 or 3 years. And that's why they brought in guys like Grady Jarrett and Joe Tooney, who are very seasoned veterans. Both still have a lot to give in the tank, in my opinion. I don't think Joe Tooney's going to fall off at all. I think he's just going to continue to be him. And Grady Jarrett, even after an ACL injury, is showing that he can still play. He played for all 17 games this year. To get into Odengbo, that deal, yes, it's a lot of money for a guy that we're not really sure of, but there's a reason that he's here. Number one, he fits the profile, which I'm sure you mentioned a few minutes ago, of Dennis Allen's defensive end. It's like the prototype defensive end for Dennis Allen. And matter of fact, I think Greg Gabriel comped him to Cam Jordan, like physically. With that being said, guys, I live in Terre Haute. I'm literally I'm like exactly an hour from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. So I live very close to the Colts. So I know what's going on there. I have a very good feel. And that is an incredibly dysfunctional organization right now. Badly dysfunctional. Chris Ballard was a guy that Jeff and I both liked. The Ryan Pace cycle when he was hired, we both wanted Ballard to be brought in here from Kansas City. I got to tell you, I don't think he's a very good GM. And I'm glad that Greg's not on our show right now because I know they're friends, but I got to tell you, I don't think Ballard's been a very good GM at all. Certainly not when it comes to the quarterback. He just brought in another It's hilarious that Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones are the two lowest rated QBR quarterbacks in passer rated quarterbacks in football. And those are your two quarterbacks on roster. What on earth are they doing over there? So I've seen the dysfunction. And clearly, Odengbo wasn't put in good situations last year. They had him all over the line. You had injuries up front to your nose tackle and your 3 technique. So he was having to play inside, and he's not really an inside player. He can do it. The versatility is great. But that's why his sack numbers were down last year versus having 8
all up and down the line.
Yes.
All up and down the line.
He had 8 sacks in 23 and only 3 in 24.
That's a positive.
That is a positive. But I think that the 3 is because he was on the inside so much, and he's asked to eat up a lot of space there. But it's a great thing that he's so versatile. That's going to be great here because we can move him up and down the line. And that's the one thing, if you guys haven't learned anything from Ryan Poles, the guy loves versatility. He looks for versatility on both sides of the line. He likes having guys that can play tackle spots and guard spots and preferably center as well. And on the defensive line, it's almost like a prerequisite that you have to be able to play inside and outside. So this is a good thing. I like the move. I admittedly didn't know a whole lot about him. Still really don't know much about him. And my first thought was, oh, not a Colt, because I hate the Colts, guys. They're probably next to the Packers my number 2 most hated team. I can't stand them. And a lot of that is because I live so close and I have to listen to these insufferable fans down here that
they are bad guys.
They are insufferable.
First-hand witness, because I lived down there for a little bit. It's bad. And
everybody here thinks that Peyton Manning was God's gift to earth and he's the greatest quarterback ever. And it's like, you guys, he was a great regular season quarterback. He was terrible in the playoffs. He won a Super Bowl because his defense was incredible, and he won another Super Bowl because his defense was incredible. He was terrible in that Denver game that they won. He was awful. But in any case, I've seen what that dysfunction's like here. So I don't play a whole lot into what happened with him last year in Indianapolis. And if Ryan Poles and Dennis Allen think this is a guy that they can bring in here and he will work here, I trust that. Dennis Allen has a long history of success. I don't doubt his ability to run a defense at all. So I'd like the move if they like the move. And then if you guys haven't noticed yet or haven't heard yet, Jeff, we haven't gotten to this yet, but the Bears signed what I believe is probably going to be their number 4 receiver, not their number 3, but he's a slot guy, and that's, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Olamide Zacchaeus?
Well, I believe, yeah, Olamide Zacchaeus, I believe is how it's pronounced.
The last name is the same as Zacchaeus from the Bible, but
had it all typed out how to pronounce it, and I lost it here now. But I
think it was Olamide, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so. Yeah.
In any case, I'm not real sold on this move just because this is now his 4th. Let me finish. I know it's only a 1-year deal. This is his 4th team, but with the exception of the 1 year in Philly, the guy has had 500 yards every season. So he's productive. He'll get the job done. And for, I don't know I think it's a $2.5 million deal for 1 year. That's chump change. No big deal. That's actually a good contract. And if you get anything out of him, if you get the 500 yards he's had every other year, then that's a great deal. But again, I think that's your number 4. I doubt that's your number 3, but only time will tell. Tyler Scott, I think they've kind of put on the back burner. I think, him not being able to track the deep ball has been that was the whole reason they brought him in, was because of his speed. And then the guy just can't track the deep ball. And I doubt that got any better last year. He just didn't play, but they like him on special teams. So I don't see him losing a roster spot necessarily, but I don't think that he's in line for that 3 or even 4 receiver spot. I do think they're going to draft the number 3 receiver if I had to guess. That's my assumption. But I don't know. What do you think about him, Jeff? Do you think he's the 3 or the 4?
Well, it says right here, by the way, he's got it on the screen, Olamide Zacchaeus. So I was pretty damn close. In any case, I don't mind it. Like I was getting ready to say earlier, but I got a little anxious there trying to cut you off. But it's a 1-year deal. 1-year deal. I didn't see exactly what the money was. It's probably nothing fancy. He had 45 catches last year in Washington, which is a pretty good number. Like you said, he's had 500 catches in multiple seasons in his career here so far. Shiftier guys, obviously got good hands. I think he could. I think they're still going to be looking to draft a potential receiver. They may even look for a guy who either gets cut or a guy who's still available in the 2nd or 3rd waves of free agency, possibly. But I do think that they're going to look for a guy in the draft. Where that will be remains to be seen, because I don't think they're looking for a guy who's going to come in and be, a big time target. They just need some depth. Maybe I could see a burner, a guy who comes in with some speed. Like you said about Tyler Scott, I don't know if it's necessarily so much an issue with his tracking ability. The guy's just got stone hands. He can't catch anything. Doesn't matter where he's at on the field. You throw him the ball, he just ain't going to catch it. So that's the biggest problem with Scott, and I think that's the biggest reason why he didn't have much play time last year, is because he just can't catch the damn ball. So, I feel like, again, this is a guy who had 45 catches last year. He's had several productive seasons in his career, so I don't mind the move, especially on a 1-year deal. Give you some juice in the receiver room. Guy who's done it has had some production. As Aldo has on his screen here, he's a former Washington Commander. He caught a career high 52 passes for 551 yards and 3 touchdowns between the regular season and playoffs this past season, 2024. So, obviously it's 12 catches in the playoffs there. So, he's a guy who, what did they play? 3 playoff games? So that's pretty good. He's averaging 4 catches in the playoffs. No, it wasn't only 2 games.
They beat Green Bay, and then they lost to they beat Detroit and lost to
Philly.
Oh, my gosh. Philly. Yeah.
Philly? I think they only lost.
Yeah, Philly.
Yeah, Philly. I think they
beat Minnesota. Was it Minnesota or Detroit they beat? It was Detroit. It was Detroit.
I don't remember.
It was Detroit, because nobody expected that to happen.
I thought they only played 3 games, but so in any case, if they played 2, that's 6 catches games.
They might have won 2. Maybe they did beat Minnesota and Detroit.
It doesn't matter.
They did anyway.
My whole point was that it's pretty good production for 3 games in the playoffs to have 12 catches. So, or 2 games, whichever one. So it's a guy who, again, it's a depth piece. I still think that they're not done attacking that position. I think I'll give you guys a couple positions to still keep an eye on in the draft. I still think they're going to look to add an interior offensive lineman, at least one, especially one that's got center guard flexibility. I think there's a serious chance they could be looking at a defensive lineman, an edge defender in particular. I think there's a chance they're going to be looking for a receiver at some point in the draft, a safety in the draft at some point in the draft, a running back at some point in the draft. And I also think it's possible we might be looking at a tackle some point in the draft. So we'll have to wait and see. It just depends on who's there. I just feel like with what they've done so far, as we've all talked about in the past, they've really opened themselves up to just about anything they want to do in the draft. It all just depends on how the board lines up. You guys know, you've heard me on record saying I'm not the biggest fan of taking Ashton Genty in the top 10. I don't know if that's a guy I want personally for the Bears in any scenario in the first round. I just don't know if I like that for the Bears right now. I don't think that I still don't think they're even a running back away. But I will say that I feel like the moves that they've made has lined it up to where it's certainly a possibility that they could take him, and it wouldn't be a bad move at this point. I just don't know that I would necessarily like it that much, especially because it's such a deep running back class. And I like a lot of the running backs that are in this class. So I just think, and I do want to dig into this draft class a little bit, guys. So let me kind of just branch off a little bit into what I think, because I want to see what you guys think too here in the chat. Now, I did see, I think it was Vizo was in the chat talking earlier about a couple of edge defenders. And I want to mention this right off the bat because there's a guy I think after the moves that we've seen happen now in free agency and the trades, I think it's a lot more, I should say it's more of a possibility that they don't go after offensive line in the first round, and defensive line is more of a possibility to me. And I think especially because of the fact it's so hard to find edge defenders, impact edge defenders, I should say, outside of the first round, and particularly early in the first round, I think there's a good chance that they'll try to find an impact one at 10 if they have to be stuck there. Now, as you guys have heard me and Tim say multiple times in the past, I still like a trade down in the first round. And if they can manage to do that, obviously it takes two to tango, but if they can manage a decent trade down in the first round to accrue more draft capital, I would be on board with that. But if they have to stick at 10, I'll give you guys a couple scenarios that I wouldn't mind there. Now, as I mentioned before, Vizo Joe, I think it was you who was talking about, I think it was James Pierce and Mike Green, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was you, Vizo. Something I have to mention, guys, and I think it's important here because a lot of these guys that we've been talking about, a lot of these edge defenders, a lot of these offensive tackle prospects, a lot of these guys who are good college players, we look at them and we try to plug them in with the Bears and say, we have a need at this spot. This is a guy who makes sense because he was good in college or he had a good senior bowl or he tests well, whatever the case may be. A couple guys that you mentioned, Vizo, James Pierce and Mike Green. I do not see them as fits for the Bears. Arm length. We've talked about this at length, ad nauseum in the past several times. And there's a reason for it. Because it's just not what Ryan Poles and this regime has done historically. And it's even something they've talked about at length in the past. They really value, no pun intended, length on the edges, both on the defensive edge position and at offensive tackle. It's an important trait to them. It's one of the most important traits to them. I've mentioned this before on the show. There was a 1920 football drive video they did, that segment that they have on their YouTube channel, the Bears. And they were showing some of the credentials that they look for, some of the important traits that they look for in draft prospects. And under offensive tackle, the number one trait was length. That is not a coincidence, guys. That's an important factor, something they're seriously going to look at. And I do understand these guys that we're talking about here, some of these guys who have the shorter arms. Will Campbell's another one who's a tackle, who's got shorter arms, who probably is not going to be a tackle in the league because of that. Could
probably
be
going to be a Bear because of that.
You're right. I should say, I don't think I'm not going to say he can't be. I just don't think he would be with the Bears, and they wouldn't be looking at him as a tackle. And other teams would probably think the same thing. So I'm sure a lot of teams would think the same thing. So these guys, I don't think that means they can't be good players in the league. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong on that. I think a lot of these guys can be productive players and will be productive players. I just don't necessarily think that they're fits for the Bears for reasons I've already specified. So that length is an important detail. So a guy that I'm looking at as a serious possibility in this draft right now, especially if they have to stick at 10 and they can't move down at all. One guy that I've had my eye on for the last week or so now, especially after these moves that they've made, is Mykel Williams, the edge from Georgia. And the reason I mention this is there's a couple of reasons for it. It's a guy who kind of fits all the criteria as far as the traits are concerned. Number one, he's got the length, he's got the size. He's a little smaller than, like, obviously Odangbo. Odangbo was like 287 pounds or something like that. This guy's 270, so he's not quite that big, but he's big. He's 6'6", if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, he does have the arm length. I think he's got over 34-inch arms, maybe even 35. Maybe not quite that, but he's got requisite arm length for an edge defender. He's got athletic ability. He's got bend. He's got production. He had some injury. He had a bit of an injury this past year at Georgia, where his production was not quite as good as you'd like it to be. But again, he was kind of dealing with some stuff there at Georgia his last year there. And this is a guy, but before the season started, before the college season, even going into the year, through parts of the year, everybody thought this guy was a top 10 pick. So again, there's been some issue there with the injury, a little bit of did not quite play as well as you'd like him to. He's still pretty good against the run. Again, he's got a lot of intriguing traits. He's got good tape. He does a lot of things you would expect him to do well. I think he's a fit for this defense. He's a guy to keep an eye on. And, I understand that there's going to be people who aren't on board with him, who aren't on his bandwagon, but it's a guy who's been productive in the SEC. And again, somebody who, if you'd have been watching 6 months ago, everybody thought this guy was a top 10 pick. But the injury kind of hurt him a little bit. So I don't know if that's something that the Bears are going to be turned off by. It's hard to say. But I think he's somebody to keep an eye on because, again, you might not be able to find somebody to move down, and you have to take somebody there. And he's a guy who has that requisite arm length and all the other traits you look for. Some of the other guys in that area might not have that. What do you think, Tim?
I think this is where so I'm just going to go out and say it. Bye, Jeff. I was watching Swifty's show earlier today with Greg on it, and Greg made the comment that there's pretty much no scenario he can think of that the Bears would take a guard with that first round pick because this signing these guys in the center or trading for those guys and signing that center kind of negated a reason because his opinion is you don't take a guy if he's not a starter day one. And I agree with that, but I got to admit that I actually disagree with Greg on this one, and I hope he doesn't hear me because that's the last person I want to hear me is to disagree with is him. He's going to slander me on Twitter next. I'm kidding, but if you're following what the best teams in football do, let's just use Philadelphia as an example because they're notorious for this. This is what they do. They load up on the trenches, both sides. The guys they have don't have to start. And if we can see it, was it Milton Williams? Is that his name that just signed some ridiculous contract with Tennessee? He's not even a starter in Philly. But this is what they do. They get the most out of the guys that they have because they stock up on both sides of the trenches. So to me, I keep hearing people think that it's going to be a tackle here or another defensive lineman, which I could see the defensive lineman happening. I don't see it being tackle. Reason being, well, let me rephrase that. I don't see it being like a Josh Simmons. They're not going to take a chance on him. It's the Bears. They're not going to do that. Ryan Poles has shown that he does not do things like that. He's very conservative as far as those picks go. And there's not, in my opinion, a tackle at 10 in this draft that's worthy of taking at 10 to be like a left tackle, which is what everybody thinks we need to do because everybody's out on Braxton, which admittedly, I'm probably a little bit out on Braxton too. I think he's reached his ceiling. But like I've said on this show many times now, you got to see what Karan can do. You got to give Amagaji a chance to be the starter, in my opinion. You just drafted him last year. He had no camp. He was injured the whole first start of the season. He gets told the night before his first game that he's going to start. So, to me, you got to see what you got in that guy. He had some flashes last year. He looked really bad a few times, too, in those games. But he had some really nice flashes. To me, that's your left tackle of the future, in my opinion. At least you have to give him the opportunity.
I was going to say, you got to at least give him a chance.
You got to give him the opportunity to be the starter of the future. I don't think they're taking a tackle. But this is where I disagree with Greg. I do think they could take a guard at 10, especially one that has flexibility of playing tackle. Because why would you not improve the depth? I'm not saying that they are for sure going to do that. I'm saying they're going to take the best available player. And if the best available player on their board is a guard, they're going to take that guard, in my opinion. Why wouldn't you? Why would you not try to improve your O-line? Because number one, Tooney's aging. Jonah Jackson's got a little bit of an injury history. Why wouldn't you do that? Especially with those guys, they're only going to. I have never been against guys sitting for a year or two before they start, especially at positions like quarterback and offensive line, positions that are very difficult to walk in and be good off the bat, to be Pro Bowl caliber players off the bat. And I've talked about Membu on this podcast relentlessly, but I do think that would be a great fit. And if he's available, I'm still taking him, regardless of the signings and the trades. I'm still taking that guy if he's available, because at 10, that value is excellent, and he can play tackle if you need him to. Jeff, I know you had a point, so I don't know. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I just want to say that I don't think guard is out. I really don't. I know people think that you're going to have to get a starter there, but to me, you take the best available player that's there. That's the only way to draft. You have to take the best available player, because then your team will improve over and over and over again. But if you do this, got to draft for a need, you're reaching for that player, and you just never know what's going to happen there.
See, after what they've done, taking a guard at 10 is probable. I don't think that would be the move. Now, here's another thing too, is like, who was it? I think it was Vizo said Membo is a worthy offensive tackle 10. He's a worthy player at 10, but I just don't think that makes sense to the Bears for a variety of reasons.
Let me freeze you just for a second. Okay, go ahead, but I want to address J2K's comment. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because look, here's the thing. Even if he's a tackle, this guy's a right tackle. He's played right tackle in college. Yes. If you bring him in to play tackle for the Bears, what do you do with Darnell Wright? You move him to the left side. He had his best success in college as a right tackle. He's been a right tackle in the league. So why would you move him? It just doesn't make sense. This is a chestnut checkers thing here. Okay. So we got to consider that. If you bring Membo in you look at him as a long-term solution at guard, most likely. And if that's the case, I don't know that you bring him in now to do that when you can get a guard. That's a pretty deep class, interior O-line. You can probably get one in the second round who you can develop into a long-term solution, and you can get a more impactful player right now in the first round. Now, there's another comment real quick before I let you address J2Ks. There's another comment in here from let me see if I can find it. Damn it, where'd it go? It's going to kill me trying to find it. Scrolls, here we go. I'm not drafting a backup or rotational player at 10, a day one starter only. For the most part, I agree with you, Scrolls. The idea is to find a day one starter right away to be your guy. That being said, there are
Membo would be a starter anywhere.
I don't think he would be a starter on day one with the Bears right now.
Not with the Bears, but he is a starting caliber player at right tackle or guard.
Well, with the Bears right now, he wouldn't be. So that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to make. So with the Bears here, and this is the one area where I would slightly disagree with what Scrolls was saying there. You obviously always are pushing to look for that. You're always looking to do that, to get a guy who's going to come in and be a starter right now. In the top 10, you want an impact player right now on day one. But at the end of the day, if you're picking a guy at 10, that's a guy who you expect to be a long-term impact player also. So not just right away, and not necessarily right away. So the reason I say that is this. there are situations. I mean, look at like Phillies. Philly's a really good example. It's not obviously they're not drafting the top 10 every year. They're drafting later on in the first round for the most part, but they're a team that is constantly loading up in the trenches, both offensive and defensive lines, and early picks, premium picks, because they know what happens. They know these guys are going to end up being number one rotational pieces early on, and they're going to end up being long-term impact pieces. Nolan Smith's a good example of that for the Eagles right now. He's the guy where when he came in as a rookie, he didn't really do a whole lot, but look at what he does for him now. So it's just, and in a particular case, like again, with the Bears, is Odangbo the long-term solution at the edge position? I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen him do that yet. The hope is that he can become that. But again, this is the area in the draft where you get edge solutions in the top 10 here. This is where you find guys who can become that, who can become those long-term impact players. So that's why, I think there's a good chance you look for an edge defender here. That's, part of the reason why I like Williams so much. Plus, I just think he's a damn good football player. And there's people who are going to be fans of him and people who aren't going to be fans of him. And I understand that there's going to be people who are fans of Mike Green and James Pierce. I like them too. I think they're good football players. Again, I just don't think they're fits for the Bears. And historically, from what the Bears have done, I don't see them as options for them. So that's why I keep saying that to you guys. It's not because I don't agree with you guys. I don't think they're going to be good players, because I do. I think it's important for us all to consider that historically the Bears don't go after guys who have sub 33-inch arms on the edges, either a tackler or defensive edge, or defensive end, the edge position. So we have to keep that in mind, especially with premium picks in the draft. They're going to be looking for guys with traits. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I don't disagree with you there. You guys are saying a lot of really good stuff and driving this conversation. But although if you can find it, that first comment from J2K about you have to take a left tackle in the top 10 if you have the opportunity. Answer, I got it right here. And I'm going to address your question here. You said, what happens if Karan isn't ready or good at left tackle and we don't have a top 20 pick next year? Do you overpay Braxton, trade up for a left tackle, or overpay for a left tackle in free agency? Simmons solves this, in your opinion, which a couple things to that. Number one, only to be fair and honest, only Ryan Poles and that coaching staff knows if Karan is ready to go or if he's going to be a good left tackle. In my opinion, you just drafted him last year. You have to see what he is this year. You have to. You have to give him an opportunity. Otherwise, you wasted a third-round pick on him last year. And if we've known anything from Poles thus far, he gives his guys that he drafts every opportunity to be what he thought they would be when he drafted them. Look how long they hung on to Velus Jones. Okay. Number two, I agree with you that you typically have to go into the top 10 to find that pick. Let me start with Josh Simmons. I agree with you that he's probably the best pure left tackle in this draft based on what we've seen. However, the sample size isn't that large at left tackle. I think he only started one season at left tackle, and it was at Ohio State. He came from, if I'm not mistaken, smaller school, South Dakota State, San Jose State, one of those, something like that.
Who?
Simmons was a transfer from a smaller school. In any case, the injury's scary to me. It is, especially as a rookie left tackle on the offensive line, where you have to have good movement skills. You have to be able to bend. It's one thing for last week when we had Carl on, he made an excellent point here with this. It's one thing for it to be your quad. That's not as big of a deal because that's going to heal for the most part. But something like a knee, which is what all of your range of motion on your legs require, is to have good knees. To have that as a rookie, to bring a rookie in with that kind of an injury that you don't know how it's going to be, you don't know how he's going to heal from that. They're saying that he's going to be fine, but who's going to say he's bad? Nobody's going to do that. They're not going to try to hurt his draft stock. So to me, I'm not taking that risk. That's just me. And from Ryan Poles, what we've seen of him so far, he feels the same way. He doesn't take those risks like that, especially not with the 10th overall pick. and you need a left tackle. So the other part of this is, like I said, you got to give Karan the opportunity. But if it were to come down to the fact that he's not, if we see him this year and we see Braxton this year, neither one of them are the guy, then yes, next year would be the year that, in my opinion, you move up for the left tackle, because next year's tackle class is going to be excellent from everything that I've seen. Go ahead, really. I'm going to finish my point.
Yeah, I want to make this quick because there's right here on the screen, J2K says if you can solve, in his opinion, if you solve a premium position like left tackle and you have a top 10 pick, best left tackles go early, and in the first round, I don't think we have the luxury wait. I totally agree with that, J2K. Caveat. Here's the issue with that. If it's the right tackle, no pun intended there, because it's probably going to be a left tackle in that scenario. But if it's the guy that makes sense, if it's a guy who is worthy of that pick, I'm not saying Simmons' talent isn't worthy of it. But as Aldo alluded to in the chat, his medicals are going to play into this. And Tim has been talking about that too. When the Bears have an opportunity to bring him in, which I'm sure they will bring him in for a top 30 visit, when they bring him in and they get a chance to have their doctors look at him, they're going to check everything out. And if everything checks out okay, it would not surprise me, because the tape is there. The tape is there. I agree with you on that, J2K. I think he's a good player, and I think he makes sense if the injury is not an issue. However, as we have seen in the past year now, that kind of stuff has bitten him a little bit. Karan was not ready last year, not even close. He was a guy who came in as a third-round pick. He played at a lower level of competition. He needed some time to develop anyways. He was thrust into a role he wasn't ready for, coming off an injury that he didn't have a training camp to prepare for the season after. So I just think that he was a guy who wasn't ready. I don't think that he's not a guy who can still play, because I think Karan can still be a player. That's why I think they have this competition here. Let's not forget, Braxton Jones isn't terrible, guys. And I think he's going to play a lot better with the offensive line that they've got now, with Joe Tooney next to him, okay? And if they can actually get a running back who can chip worth a dick. So that's another thing we got to consider too. So if we put all that into perspective, I think there's a lot to consider here. If the medicals check out, I wouldn't be surprised by it, J2K. But there's other guys at that spot too. And again, as I've said before many times, I think the trade down makes the most sense if you can. But if they're stuck at 10, there's a handful of guys in that area that I could see him going after. And Simmons is one of those guys, honestly. But again, the medicals are everything there. They're everything for him. Go ahead, Tim. Finish your point.
Okay, so to finish my point, like I said, if the scenario would arise that neither one of them is the guy, which if Karan shows you that he can play as well as Braxton Jones, which, is, let's face reality, he's a little bit above average at left tackle. Braxton Jones is not terrible. He's not probably a franchise left tackle, but he's not terrible. If Karan gives you the same thing, you still have him for 2 years at very little cost. But, so you don't have to worry about him until you'd have to worry about Caleb. The second part of this, like I said, if he doesn't pan out, the tackle class next year is excellent from everything that I hear and from the players that I know are likely coming out next year. And if that's the case, you could move up to take your tackle. That's when, if you're a tackle away, you're willing to give up the future first-round pick to move up. Because now you feel like your roster is in a good place to do that. Thus far, Ryan Poles hasn't done that. If anything, he's traded back to pick up assets. He's never traded out of a first-round pick. But if he sees the left tackle of the future, and I know you liked Simmons, J2K, but there are better tackles in next year's draft than Josh Simmons. I can almost guarantee you that. I know of a few of them already off the top of my head. So if that's the case, you can live 100%. You could live this year with Karan and or Braxton with Joe Tooney next to him. You can. You honestly, if you went to the Super Bowl, you could probably win with one of those guys at your left tackle spot. So to me, if you can and you're willing to live with those guys for a year, Next year's the year to get that tackle, and you have put yourself in a position with your roster that you could make that deal to go up in the first round and take your left tackle. It's like the whole running back conversation everybody keeps talking about. As you guys know, they're not a running back away. I'm telling you, I'm squashing it right now. The Bears are not taking Genty at 10. It ain't happening. I don't care. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But in my opinion, there is zero chance that Genty will be a Bear at pick 10.
I don't know if there's zero chance, but
in my opinion, there's zero chance. I could see them potentially taking a running back in the first round, but the only way they do that, in my opinion, is if they move down in the first round.
Okay,
I don't see a scenario at 10 at all.
I got to stop you because you've been neglecting to get to this, but Mr. Shorty donated to us again. Thank you, Mr.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm sorry. Wasn't paying attention.
I think you meant to say you spent more money on eggs in this super chat, which I completely believe, Mr. Shorty. The price of eggs right now is just unreal.
Then it went down $1.80 national average in the last week, so maybe it'll keep going down.
It's like $10 for like the cheapest dozen eggs you can get.
Yeah, but you live in California where the cost of living is stupid.
I'm just saying, it's like the cheapest dozen eggs you can get here right now. It's like
you'll think you're politicians over there.
It's crazy. In any case, thank you so much, Shorty. He says he especially loves the bar room and our podfather, who is Aldo, our executive producer, Aldo. We love him too. Thank you, Aldo, for everything you do. And he says, great show, Willis Twins. Thank you, Mr. Shorty, for that. So we're running out of time. We got a late start today, so let's get to these questions in here. We had a good show so far tonight, guys, and I do want to dig into some of these draft prospects. Luckily, we have some time to get into that over the next month or so. But what I want you guys to do over the next course of the next month or so is, if you're not following us on Twitter already, follow us on X, either between myself or Tim or Aldo or whoever, and give us guys that you would like to know our thoughts on draft prospects who the Bears could either be looking at, whether it be first round prospects, second round guys, later round guys you think that could be options for the Bears, and we'll do our best to give you our thoughts on them. And I'll try to even watch as much tape as I can on them if I haven't already. So give us thoughts on guys that you like or you want us to give thoughts on, and we'll do our best to do that over the next couple weeks or so, guys. So a couple questions in here. Let's get to so first one here. Where'd it go? Howie wants to know, can Braxton improve with Tooney next to him? And Dalton and Jonah.
Let me take it real quick. Let me take it. Let me take it real quick. Yes, I think Braxton can improve with Tooney next to him. I think anybody could improve with Tooney next to him. However, if I had to bet my bottom dollar, by week 5 at the latest, Karan Amagaji is going to be your starting left tackle for the Bears. I think he's got more upside. I think he's got the better rear end, for lack of a better term. He's got a better anchor because he's bigger in the waist than Braxton Jones. He's going to have a full camp and full everything this year, as long as he's healthy, which it sounds like he is. So do I think Braxton can improve? Yes, but I think Karan's your left tackle this season. Truly my opinion.
I think it's possible he is at some point. I think Braxton is the week 1 starter. And if it becomes an issue where he really is, I mean, it's just like he's exposing him too much, which, yeah, he's had his issues, but I agree with what I think it was Vizo said earlier in the chat, that the interior offensive line was way more the issue in the past than Braxton has been. Yeah, Braxton's going to lose his share of one-on-ones. Of course he is. It's going to happen. You know, he has, we all know he's got an issue with the bull rush, but at the same time, yeah, I agree. Howie, I do think he's going to play better with Tooney next to him. I think Tooney's going to help him understand things. I think Tooney's going to help him with technique. I think Tooney's going to help him pick stuff up that he doesn't see. He's going to do that a lot with everybody around him. So I think that all around they're going to play better up front. And I think Braxton is more than serviceable, at least for right now. That's why I don't think you have to take a tackle in the top 10. I think that's where most of the time where you get those guys, where you get the impactful ones at. But number one, I don't know if there's, like Tim said earlier, I'm not sure there's one in this draft that I think is that guy, or at least is a safe bet. Simmons being the only, but I'm not sure if he's that safe with the injury history. So again, I don't know that that's the best bet. There's a couple and at least one edge defender and a handful other guys I like in that area. So yes, I do think he can play better there. I think they're opened up to do whatever they want at this point. So yes, I think there's a good chance that Braxton's going to be the day 1 starter, and I think there's a chance even he could finish the season out. But I agree with you, Tim. Karan he's going to be knocking at the door. The guy has a lot of potential. So moving on here, see what other questions we've got. Here we go. Howie wants to, here's another one from Howie.
This was a
he wants to know if we'd rather have A, Montez at 25 and Dio at 16 million, which is 41 million between the two of them, plus a rookie, plus a round 2 rookie defensive lineman versus Trey Hendrickson at 30 million with Emmanuel Ogbah at 6 million, which is 36 million plus a round 1 rookie defensive end. How about I counter you, Howie, and I'd say I'd rather have Montez, Dio, and a round 1 rookie edge. And I would take probably Michael Williams in that scenario, as you guys already heard me say, but there's a handful of other guys I like there too. I do like Williams a lot. I think he's a guy who makes sense for this defense. I think he's a guy who's going to come in and give you some production right away. He doesn't have to come in and be the guy right now, because there's other guys on this defensive line who can take pressure off him. But I think he can be very productive coming off the edge, especially on obvious rush situations. So, and he's a good run stopper at that. So that's my counter to that, Howie. What do you think, though, Tim, in response to his question here?
I would rather take A. I like Hendrickson is obviously the best player of anybody on this list here. It's not even close. But I would rather have multiple good assets than one great asset. I'm sorry, but Ogbah hasn't been good in years. You pair him with Hendrickson, I don't know if you're getting much out of that side. The round 1 rookie, I'd be good with. And yes, I like Hendrickson the best of anybody here, but I think Montez, Dio, and a rookie from round 1 or round 2, plus what you already got, I think is plenty good. And the reason I say that is, number one, the cheaper those guys, you get a little bit of a discount there on those guys, and you're able to add more pieces. You get Hendrickson at 30 million, you're really limited in what you can do after that. And does the value of the player outweigh the value of the money? Does that make sense? I just don't think that if Hendrickson was the missing piece and the only thing that we needed on that defensive line, that's one thing, but he's not. We weren't there. We might be getting closer now, but I still don't think we're there. And I don't think even if you bring Hendrickson in, it makes you Super Bowl ready. I think they're building it the right way. I think they're adding multiple pieces, and that's the right way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing real quick, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but there's a couple things. There's a comment in here from Aldo that he posted. It was Dane Brugler's scouting report on Karan Amagaji before the draft last year. Said he had a 3rd-round grade on him. He's a raw prospect who needs technical and strength work before he sees live NFL reps, but his physical ingredients and competitive drive are the foundational elements that pro coaches want to develop. So that was obvious to me last year if you watched him play. He obviously lacked strength and some of those technical areas where he needed to be better that he just didn't have because he's a rookie 3rd-rounder playing from Yale, and he was hurt all through training camp. Go ahead, Tim.
And you think they didn't know that? You think the Poles didn't know that when they brought him in, that he was going to be a little bit of a project?
And I think they didn't realize he was going to miss that kind of time, though, either.
My point exactly. So anybody that's saying what they saw from him last year is enough to think that he can't play, he was never ready to play. Well, he was never ready to be brought in.
I will say this. It's enough to make you skeptical.
Yes, but the flashes were good, though, too. He had great flashes as well.
I'll just say that I'm not going to give any kind of ultimatum on the kid yet.
No.
At all. He's got, in my opinion, you give him a chance. Now, there's also a comment in here real quick that I want to mention from J2K that was interesting, if I can find it here. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. No, that wasn't it. Here we go. Tackles tend to be on an island. Better offensive guards help overall, including Braxton, but not directly Braxton. He'll still lose on the bull rush regardless who's next to him. And I said that in my comment. I said, look, he's gonna get help now with tuning. There's gonna be cases where he didn't get help before that he will, but he's still gonna lose one-on-ones on occasion. He's still gonna get beat on the bull rush. We know that. it's going to be better for him now, though. And he's just not that bad. I mean, even when he does lose, it's not one of those things where he's so bad that like, it's like, oh my God, we got to move on. He's
not on the ground player. Like Shelton.
No, he's been a serviceable player. Yeah, he's not the best. He's middle of the road. So,
but that's why I said that he's got that ceiling, because he doesn't have the build to withstand that bull rush, and I don't think that's ever going to change. He's never going to have the anchor to do that. That's why I think he's got that ceiling. But again, it's got to be proven on the field. But I think that's what Amagaji has that Braxton does not.
Give him a chance. Let him battle it out. Like I said, give him a chance. And if you see that after year 2, Karan is just not going to be the guy. He can't get it done. Then I understand. And I understand your point too, J2K. It's like these are scenarios where you want to do this. Last year, I was all about like not wanting to draft a receiver in the top 10. Wasn't I, Tim? I wanted him to take the edge defender last year.
I also told you were crazy.
I still think Dallas Turner is going to be a good player, but he wasn't what I expected him to be in year 1. So my whole point is that it just depends on the situation. Josh Simmons might not be the best bet here, because of what the Bears have going on. So, and because of his injury concerns. So,
Sproles makes an excellent point here.
Yeah, Karan is working in the offseason with Olin, which we've heard in the past. He's getting coached by Roshar with the death stare from Ben Johnson. May just make the leap this year. And I agree, Sproles. He's the kid's got all the traits, and he's a kid who wants it. He wants to be better. We know that. So,
matter of fact, we mentioned that 2 or 3 weeks ago that you can't tell me that Roushar's not looking this guy and not salivating over that athleticism and the traits. Yes.
Let's give him a chance. And
yes, J2K Braxton is also working with Olin.
If they decide to take a tackle in the first round, fine. But like I said, guys, before, I just don't think there's any first-round tackles in this draft that are like surefire bets that don't have concerns. So it's just really how it is. So moving on, we're really kind of going over here. So let's just get these last few out of the way. Here's one from Smitty. Dio signing reminds me of when the Bears signed Akeem Hicks. He had 3 sacks the year before and 9.5 for his career up to that point. Little similar, yeah. The difference is Dio was a second-round pick who had traits from the beginning. He kind of got drafted into a bad situation. Hicks was like an undrafted free agent from Canada or something. So when he was brought on by New England, I believe, and he was kind of so-so there. But it's the same thing. He was a raw guy, raw player. And when the Bears got him, he was just a dominant wrecking force. They brought it out of him. He became a fantastic player. So I do kind of see.
Was Dennis Allen with the Saints when he was there? Was Dennis Allen with the Saints when Akeem Hicks was there?
Probably.
I bet he was, because that would have been about 8-9 years ago, right?
He's been there for a long time, so probably.
Yeah.
One more question from Howie, and then we'll get out of here. Howie wants to know, was it a mistake to extend Jonah Jackson before he even played a game for us? I mentioned at the top of the show. After they made
I think it's more of a cap maneuverability than it is. I think
so,
he kind of had to. Yeah.
I think it's a matter of, I think that's part of it. I think there's a couple things here. So it was a mistake. I don't think it's a mistake. I think the financial aspect was a part of it, but I also think, Howie, that Ben Johnson clearly has conviction in his guy that played for him. He thinks he can get the job done. So I think that's a big part of it too. I just think that they're not afraid to give him that security because they believe they can get this guy who's been a Pro Bowl player. So if Ben Johnson thinks he can get him to do what he wants to do with his line, he's envisioning what he wants to do with his offensive line, then I trust that. And I don't think it's a bad move. So I don't know, Tim, do you have any thoughts on that about extending him, whether you think it was a mistake? I mean, I know you said that.
I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was more, like I said, they had to move that money around a little bit. Like I told you guys earlier, they were out of cap space. They were out of cap space before they even signed Grady Jarrett. Well, they were close on cap space before they signed Grady Jarrett. When he got signed, if you're basing your cap hit on the average annual for every player that they've signed or traded for so far, they were over the cap already, way over the cap. So they had to make some moves. They had to, number one, they're going to have to do some restructuring. I still think they're over right now in order to pay draft picks and sign other guys. Plus, they've made the other signing of Zacchaeus. So, yes, I don't have a problem with it. And I'm sure it doesn't change the fact that they could get out of that deal after this year if they still needed to, even with that year extension. Like I said, I think that was just to kind of push that cap number out a little bit and to extend it this year so they can have better so that they can maneuver that cap a little bit this year. Like I said, I think they're quite a bit over right now. If I had to guess, I'm almost positive they are. So I have no problem with
it. One last comment. I just typed
There's
it out.
There's the Washington schedule right there. So they did. They beat Tampa and Detroit. That was
there were 2 wins. Okay, so either way, he's averaging 4 catches a game in the playoffs. It's pretty good. So there was so real quick, you guys are making it in the chat. You're talking about our best defensive lineman ever, and I think it was Muck said that Akeem was the most dominant player we ever had on the D line. And I will push back a little bit because in '85.
I didn't watch those guys though. I saw Tommy Harris play. So I said Tommy Harris.
I've watched him. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to watch him live when I was a kid, but it's like it's hard to say that those guys were less dominant than Akeem Hicks. Those were 2 of the best players of all time. I don't know.
I think Mongo was the driving force of that too. Mongo was like
not more dominant than Hampton or Dennis.
No, but without Mongo, those guys may not have been as dominant as they were because he was the tone setter, and he's also a Hall of Famer now, just like those guys.
I'm just saying those 2 were dominant.
Yes.
But the word that was used was dominant. Those guys were dominant forces on the defensive line. So, in any case, it was a great show tonight. We're sorry we got started late. Tim was obviously behind, but here's a quick little graphic. This is neat, Eldo. Thanks for doing this.
Van Halen.
5 rock bands, as we talked about before. Only 5 rock bands have achieved the feat of having 2 original studio
Should have
albums.
known Pink Floyd, yeah.
Sell over 2 million copies in the U.S. Van Halen is one. That's not a surprise at all. They're an American band. Their original album and Van Halen in 1978 and 1984, which came out unironically 1984. And that album cover is really cool, by the way. If you guys don't know, it's a baby with wings. He's smoking a cigarette. Def Leppard, they had 2 albums as well, Pyromania in 1983 and Hysteria in 1987. Obviously, I'm wearing my Pyromania shirt right now. Led Zeppelin had Led Zeppelin, their original album in 1969 and Led Zeppelin 2 in 1970, which, by the way, if you guys don't know, actually, I think Led Zeppelin 2 technically was done by like the end of 1969. Led Zeppelin 1 came out in like January of 69. They were done with Led Zeppelin 2. Like they were like working on it while they were touring, working and doing songs from Zeppelin 1. And they finished by like December of 1969. So they were on their high horse getting that shit done. Pink Floyd was another album or another band who had 2 albums.
One of my all-time favorites.
2 million copies. Dark Side of the Moon in 73 and The Wall in 79. I have both of them on vinyl. Matter of fact, I have a bunch of these albums on vinyl.
The Wall in my opinion, The Wall might be the greatest album ever made.
Most people would say Dark Side of the Moon is better, but they are both fantastic albums.
They are, but no way is it better than The Wall.
And then the other ones, interestingly, I don't know how you consider it a greatest hits album, a studio album, but the Eagles had Hotel California in 1976, and then their greatest hits album apparently came out in 1976. Was a studio album. It sold over 10 million.
And part of that is probably Joe Walsh wasn't even with the Eagles until Hotel California came out. So that could play into that a little bit, possibly. They had great music before he was even there, and he just kind of took the top off of it. So interesting.
Yeah, that's a bit of surprise that they've got like I said, the greatest hits. Tom, I got to disagree.
I gotta disagree.
You can hate the Eagles. I love a lot of bands, and they're not my all-time favorite by any stretch. But the Eagles are good, man. Don Henley, man, this guy was a singer and he played the drums. At
that time, that was like never happened back then. That was
unbelievably
unheard of.
To do that.
Yes, and that was almost totally unheard of back then.
Don Felder and Joe Walsh, both great guitar players.
Yes.
Man, I love the Eagles are fantastic. I understand Scroll's point. He's sick, here in Hotel California because he's played in every grocery and department store. Not just San Diego Scrolls. It's played everywhere, all over the place.
I still love the solo, though.
I hear it all the time. So
still love that solo, though.
But he quoting Big Lebowski. It's a great movie, by the way, Tom.
Yes, it is. Man.
So anyways, just great show tonight, guys. Like I said, you guys, if you haven't seen already, Tim and I are obviously big music fans, especially rock music. So we're always down to have a conversation about that with you guys. So we
one more little music nugget before we go. You're wearing your Nirvana hat. Do you know the story about the album cover with the naked baby on it?
No. Actually, I think I do know the story, but I can't remember it.
The guy that was the baby, or let me rephrase it. The baby from that album cover is now like a little bit older than us. He's like 37. He was trying to sue the band a couple of years ago for that picture and wanted to have it removed because he didn't consent to the image or whatever. But it's like, the band isn't even a band anymore. How are you going to sue him? Maybe he was trying to sue the label company. I'm not really sure at the end of the day, but it's kind of funny. It's a little interesting situation there.
That was the Nevermind album. That was probably their biggest album.
Yeah. I mean, that was the one that definitely sold record, and then Cobain died shortly after. So they were really only in existence for 3 years.
Well, they were with that bass player. I mean, the original bass player was some other guy, but
the original drummer was different too. I don't think it was
Grohl. I think Grohl was there from the beginning.
I don't think Dave Grohl was the original drummer. No, he wasn't the original drummer. He was not.
No, in any case,
he came in for Nevermind.
I know the bass player wasn't, but yeah. Anyways, guys, Mug, that was a weird cover, but there's a lot of bands who had a lot of weird things.
Yeah.
Like, if you guys have ever seen the music video Soundgarden songs, Black Hole Sun. You ever seen that music video? That's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life, but it's a great song. I love Soundgarden. Chris Cornell has a phenomenal voice, but man, that was a weird music video.
Scorpions, no one liked music video. The guy walking with in his eyes around the prison.
Yeah, that was a weird music video too. There's some
good one though
out there, dude, for sure. Anyways, we appreciate you guys. Like I said, as always, thanks for being here. And as always, a reminder, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us all on extra Twitter. I'm at _Jeff Willis. Tim is at Tim Willis 24. And you can follow our executive producer, Aldo Gandia, at Barroom Network. We have awesome content on this channel besides just our show. So check us out all week long, guys, and see what we have. And outside of that, like I said, guys, great show tonight. Thank you for driving the show as you always do with your questions and your comments. And until next week, bear down.
Go Bears.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.